Land tenure security is critically important to Zimbabwe's economic growth and development. It encourages investment, improves agricultural production and productivity, and lifts men out of poverty into prosperity, our land. With secure land tenure, our farmers can access credit facilities, purchase inputs, and hire labor, ultimately increasing their yields and incomes.
Title deed kuti pawakagara pasaiva netitle deed yekhadi remusangano. Unofana kuti pawakagara usabviswa, pawakagara unofana kuva nekodzero. Kwete zviri kuitwa kuna Nachilonga, kwete zviri kuitwa kuna
Joneswe moto dapasina kupindira kwaishe echokwadi pasi pano taiona moto.
President Emmerson Mnangagwa just recently launched what he called a new policy on the land tenure, which allows people or policyholders or beneficiaries of land that was taken away from white farmers to be able to take that land, have title to the land. And once you have title, what it means is you are able to sell it, subdivide it, or do as you please with that land. And this policy has been hailed by some as progressive with their own reasons, and some have said that this is actually a mockery of the liberation war struggle that was launched by men to ensure that land does not become a purveyance of a few, should not be held hostage by a few individuals who turn it to money-making tools. Now we're going to be discussing this. Is this new policy that has been launched by President Emmerson Mnangagwa a good policy for Zimbabwe, for agriculture and for future generations, or this is wheeling and dealing? Now this is the situation right now. Now I'm your host as usual, Dara B. Join me after this break as we discuss the issues that matter to you and we ask the question, so what? Welcome back to the situation right now here on Heart and Soul TV and radio, and me, your host as usual, Dara B. Now, I'm joined in studio this afternoon by one jealous Mbizo Mawarire. Thank you very much for coming through. And I enjoy, that we have this conversation on pertinent issues around Zimbabwe's constitution, history, and its future. But jealous, the president launched a new policy that will allow beneficiaries of land taken from white farmers under the land reform to sell it and be able to borrow from the banks using it as collateral. What is your view of this policy?
Thank you for having me. I think it's a travesty of justice to even call the move that he announced any kind of a policy, because it did not go through the procedural steps that you need to take if you are going to come up with a policy that has far-reaching implications over the land tenure system in the country, the land ownership patterns, who owns land, what can they do with that land, and the overarching objectives of the liberation struggle. So we have a problem, actually, where the president acts arbitrarily at several levels. If you look at the Constitution, did he follow the Constitution in coming up with several items that are involved? Even from the very beginning, when he established the so-called Land Tenure Implementation Committee, is it a legally constituted instrument that is now exercising powers over allocation of land In fact, it's not even allocation, but it's selling agricultural land, which has a far-reaching implication on constitutional provisions, on the Land Commission Act, or the operations of the Zimbabwe Land Commission. So all those things, did the president take the provisions of the Constitution into account? Did he consult with the Zimbabwe Land Commission as provided for in the law in coming up with the Land Tenure Implementation Committee? Because there are far-reaching consequences to whatever he announced at his farm. And I liked when you said in your introductory remarks, is this wheeling and dealing? We have a president who, for all intents and purposes, has turned out to be a dealer and the head of a rich gang within Zanu PF, which is actually dealing. Now they've been dealing and selling mines. Now they are intending on selling the land. And they've disregarded for the constitutional provisions. They've disregarded for legal instruments that have been put in place to ensure how land is alienated and allocated in this country.
Maybe let us do this. Let us talk about how is land alienated in the first instance, so that our viewers can understand.
Right. The land, and the land that we're talking about here is the A1 and the A2 agricultural land. Agricultural land is administered through the Land Commission Act, Chapter 20.29. And that Land Commission Act establishes how land is owned, or agricultural land is distributed and is used in the country. Furthermore, we have a constitutional provision, Section 290 of the Constitution, which clearly states that all agricultural land in Zimbabwe is vested in the state. So you have the president and his so-called Land Tenure Implementation Committee intending to sell land to people who are currently using it under 99-year leases. And the first thing that the Land Tenure Implementation Committee does is to arbitrarily cancel 99-year leases. And this is a technical committee that is not established under the Zimbabwe Land Commission, because the Zimbabwe Land Commission is vested with powers on how to lease land and to distribute land. And the Zimbabwe Land Commission does not come into play here, even in creating the so-called Land Tenure Implementation Committee. So that's the first problem that we have. We have an institution which is outside the Constitution, which has no legal standing, which is making decisions on who owns land in Zimbabwe. And this has been done arbitrarily by the president, and the consequences have been a cancellation of 99-year leases outside the provisions of the law, outside the functions of the Zimbabwe Land Commission. And this is done at his farm. This is done arbitrarily, no consultation. And Section 293 of the Constitution is very clear on what needs to be done when you want to have a policy that has far-reaching consequences towards the land tenure system. It commands that if you want to establish a policy that has consequences on the land tenure system in the country, you have to have an act of parliament which authorizes that a reform that you are introducing in the land market. You have to have an act of parliament to do that.
I want to bring you to the constitution that you talk about, section 289.
289. 289.
of the Constitution.
No,
Let's
289.
see,
289 only deals with what needs to be done, what needs to be followed in terms of in case you come up with any land tenure system. It recognizes that land is a finite resource, and it also deals with issues of gender equality in distributing land, and a whole other gamut of indications.
Section 289B of the Constitution, we say, subject to Section 72, every Zimbabwe citizen has a right to acquire, hold, occupy, use, transfer, lease, or dispose of agricultural land regardless of his or her race or color.
Yeah.
How do you own, how do you lease or dispose if you don't have a title, if you don't have title to that land? So is it not purposive that this constitutional provision allowed for, created a purpose or a vehicle that allows for title to be given to landowners?
That's Section 289 that you are dealing with.
289.
Go to Section 290 of the Constitution. If you go to Section 290, if you go to Section 290, it tells you that all agricultural land, it's Section 290. Section 290, subsection 1. All agricultural land continues to be vested in the state. That's what Section 290 says. So, all the land that you're dealing with, Section 289 purports to be giving you powers over land. But Section 290 tells you in no uncertain terms that all agricultural land is vested in the state. And the only way that the state can transfer land into the hands of an individual is following up on the procedures that are laid down through a commission that is created under Chapter 16 of the Constitution, and which is created by Section 297 of the Constitution, which is the Land Commission. So the Land Commission can recommend that government can sell land to an individual. But if it does that, then there should be an act of parliament that would empower the government to sell land to an individual.
In your view,
so it means parliament has to be involved in coming up with a legislative framework through which government can then transfer land ownership to an individual.
We do have a land commission in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
And it is not part of the land
tenure implementation committee.
Right. Now, in your view, in your assertion, is that the president has actually bastardized the constitutional commission by creating parallel structures.
Yeah.
If you say.
Yes, for all intents and purposes, he has actually just continued with what he's doing in Zanu PF. We know in Zanu PF he has disregarded the Zanu PF constitution, and he has created a lot of parallel structures. Women for ED, Mawindi for ED, this for ED. And these are structures that he created outside the constitution. So you are having a rogue president who is importing criminal activities that he is doing in his own party. Now he is importing those criminal activities into government, into the state, and he is acting outside the provisions of the constitution. Because the constitution under Chapter 16 and under Section 297 creates the Land Commission. And the Land Commission is the one that is vested with powers to decide the land tenure system in the country. And it does that, recognizing the same provisions that we're reading in Section 289, gender equality, recognizing that land is a finite a resource, which should be allocated equally to people without even regard to their race. Those are the provisions in Section 289. So this is a president who is acting outside the provisions of the national constitution, creating parallel structures in government, in the state, like he has been doing in his own party.
I wanted us to talk about title deeds. Firstly, Before government came up with this title deeds, there was a call from those who own farms that these leases can be cancelled at any time, and therefore creating a system of patronage. Is it not a good thing then that people who have access to this land have been given title and now they own this land? You can't just move them at will. Is this not a good development?
These are not title deeds, because what the president is doing has no legal standing. One, you have provisions of Section 290 of the Constitution that we have alluded to, which says that all agricultural land is vested in the state. So you cannot, on one side, create an instrument that purports to give individual title to people when you have that provision in the Constitution. You have to deal with that provision in the Constitution first. So amend the Constitution, amend that provision which says all agricultural land is vested in the state if you want to create individual ownership. So we have a whole legal minefield that needs to be dealt with before anyone purports to sit even in Parliament, even at State House. Where's still now seated at his precab farm and say he's giving people title deeds. This is exactly what he did in Epworth. You purported to be giving people, as the president of a political party, for that matter, you purported to be giving people title deeds at a political rally. When you know the procedures of giving title deeds for residential land, you have to involve council, city council. There should be tarred roads. There should be a sewage system. There should be water reticulated into those houses before you give people title deeds. And those services are provided by council. So a president of a political party cannot, for any reason, be seen issuing title deeds.
He's not president of a political party. He's
No,
president of a country.
no, but he was campaigning as president of a political party. Even as president of a state president, you don't have those powers. You are a president, but you exercise power through delegation. That's why we have local authorities. And local authorities are the ones that are seized with the process of giving title to people that own residential land. So this what the president did, it's a ruse. It's a scheme to fleece people money, because you have problems, Baba. You have problems with even the act, the Land Commission Act. The Land Commission Act clearly says that the Minister of Agriculture can at any time create an instrument to preside over land tenure. So let's say for argument purposes, the minister consulted the Zimbabwe Land Commission and created an instrument called the Land Tenure Implementation Committee to deal with land ownership structures, giving people title deeds. But if you follow that route, if you follow that act, you still get into problems, because the same act says even if the minister consults the Zimbabwe Land Commission and comes up with a legal instrument to allocate people land, still the president at any time can retake that land, can repossess that land. That's what the act says. So you have to deal with Section 290 of the Constitution. After you have amended that and you have empowered individuals to own agricultural land, then you come back to provisions of the Act and amend them so that they conform to the provisions of the Constitution. And then you take away the powers of the president from repossessing the land that you would have given to people under.
Yeah, because I wanted to come to Section 72 of the rights to agricultural land,
yes,
which is in the Constitution. And it says that the state has, well, agricultural land or any right or interest in such land is compulsorily acquired for a purpose referred to in subsection 2. subject to section 295(1) and 2, no compensation is payable in respect of its acquisition except for improvements effected on it before its acquisition. Now, this constitutional thing, if we look at it literally and want to interpret it literally, it means that even with title deeds, and if it's still agricultural land, it can be compulsorily acquired from you, and no compensation is given.
That's the current legal standing. That's why if you owned a farm before the land redistribution exercise, if you bought a farm and you had a title deeds, now let's say you bought the land pre-2000 and you have a title deed as a black indigenous person in this country, still the government should issue you with something that is called certificate of no present interest. So it's only the certificate of no present interest which then gives you outright and sole ownership of the land for which you hold a title deed. Because if the state has interest in your land, it can acquire it through the provision that we're reading, and they will only pay for compensation for the developments that we have made. So we have to deal with such provisions in the Constitution if at all we want to promote individual ownership of agricultural land.
How do you promote individual ownership of agricultural land? Maybe just
but that's what the president is purportedly doing, without addressing all the legal minefields that you are even helping me to point out.
I'm just trying to understand this. Forgive me for interjecting, but how do you promote individual ownership or title of land to land that someone did not buy but was just given for free? I mean, isn't title given to something that you have earned, that you've actually bought? Like, for instance, a house, you buy it, you get title for it, right? How do you purport to say someone was just given a letter to say, now you're occupying that land, you can use it, and out of nowhere, it's now yours you own title to it? Help me understand that.
I don't know where you are seated, but if we go historical, would look at how did the colonial settlers get title to the land that they had, because the white commercial farmers in this country owned the land and they had title deeds, but they never paid anyone. Who did they pay? Is that the Carter Commission of 1925, which led to the Land Apportionment Act of 1930. Just I'm saying, recognized that the colonial settlers had the title.
I'm saying, is that not where the problem is?
Legalized.
Yeah, is that not where the problem is? That someone just comes and takes something and
no, but you can actually have title deeds. I can give you my house, and I institute processes for you to have title over that.
House is it? You actually end it,
yes,
right? And you have power to give it.
My house.
But if I just take, how do I get title? That's my point. How do you even begin to give title to someone who didn't buy something?
So those are now the things that you need.
Aren't we going back to the historical system where someone just came and grabbed our land and then they took title and they made it theirs?
But that's the reality of land ownership in Zimbabwe, because the agricultural land that we are talking about had title deeds, and the people that had title deeds never bought the agricultural land.
So we're going back to
they conquered, and after conquering, then they had legal instruments to establish their ownership of that land. Hence, you have the Carter Commission, the Land Apportionment Act, the Land Tenure Act of 1969. Yeah. All those instruments then came into play in order to legalize the ownership. But in the first instance, there's no money that changed hands. No one bought those land, those pieces of land, or those farms. They just created legal instruments in order for them, on the understanding that land ownership, the only qualification that they had to own land in this country was that they were civilized.
And what's the qualification now?
The qualification was We are civilized.
What is the qualification now?
No, but the qualification in Zimbabwe is that is a perpetuation of the Carter Commission findings and the Land Apportionment Act, that the black man cannot own land. That's the reason why you find there's a provision in Section 290 of the Constitution that all agricultural land is owned by the state. So the state is acknowledging the findings of the Carter Commission and the subsequent 1930 Land Apportionment Act that blacks were not civilized enough to own agricultural land. And this is what we are perpetuating.
So President Emmerson Mnangagwa is breaking that cycle?
No, he's not breaking that cycle. He's not breaking that cycle as long as he doesn't deal with the constitutional provisions that entrench that notion. If he wanted to give us land, to give people title deeds, he should have first of all gone through the process of amending the constitution, which needed parliament. But this president does not want to act within the law. He doesn't want to include parliament. He doesn't want to include even constitutionally provided for commissions like the Land Commission to deal with those things. Because a genuine person who wants individual ownership of land in this country should first of all deal with the legal instruments that outlaw the ownership of land, agricultural land, by black Zimbabweans. You have to deal with Section 290 of the Constitution, which vests all agricultural land in the hands of the state. You have to deal even with subsequent legislative act like the Land Commission Act, which says that at any time, any arrangement that you make that purports to be giving people leases or title deeds can be revoked by the action, arbitrary action of the president. The president can just say, I've repossessed the land that you were given by the minister or by the Zimbabwe Land Commission. So unless the president comes out with legal instruments that amends the constitution and states clearly within the constitution. And it's, by the way, it's not only Section 290 of the Constitution, but also we have to deal even with the 1989 Communal Lands, the 1982 Communal Lands Act, which says all communal land is vested in the state. We have to deal with such provisions. Those provisions have to be amended in order for people to individually own agricultural land or communal land in this country.
Are you saying that the president's actions are right, but the manner in which he has done it is wrong?
No, this president is not right, because the sole purpose is not to promote. He knows, he's a lawyer. He knows that what he was doing at his precab farm is by no means an instrument that is giving land ownership to individuals. He knows that. But what he is doing is fundraising. That's why he has created this thing outside the provisions of the Constitution. He has created a parallel structure that is not answerable to Parliament, a parallel structure that is not answerable to the Constitution. So he has created another chivayo here, another chivayo in the Land Tenure Implementation Committee. And this thing is acting outside the law. It's a criminal cabal that he has created in order to get money from people.
How will he get money?
He's getting, because he's selling the land. He's selling the land. Isn't he? You have to pay $500 per hectare. Let's say you own 400 hectares. How much do you pay to that committee? You pay in excess of 200,000. So look at we have the land reform.
That means those who don't have the money will lose this land.
Yes, that's why he's creating instruments through his banks, CBZ, first FBC, in order to lend people money. You see, and once you go to the bank, what do? You go to his bank. You go to his bank, you get a loan. You pay his committee. And after you have paid his committee, because you have an overhanging debt of 200,000 on 400 hectares, and this 200,000 that you have gotten from the bank is not money that you are using for buying implements and for buying fertilizer or seed. It's money that you have paid to this criminal committee. So before you have done anything, you are sitting on 400 hectares of land, and you are sitting on $200,000 debt, which you cannot service. What happens? It means after 20 years, the same bank that gave you $200, which has now accrued interest, will just come and repossess the piece of land. And once they've, so it means the president has created this committee in order for him to indirectly buy land. So after 20 years, the land will be owned by FBC, the land will be owned by CBZ. Who owns those things? Is the president through proxies like the chairman of this implementation committee, Tagiri. So in 20 years, the 11 million hectares that were acquired through the land redistribution exercise would have done two things. Created $6.6 billion for this criminal cabal. So this criminal cabal will be sitting on 6.6 billion United States dollars that they would have created and collected from beneficiaries of the A1 and A2 farm, fast track land reform. Two, after 20 years, those people that had been advanced that money who have failed to service those loans. And what happens? Now the banks that are connected to the same president who created this illegal structure will now begin the process of repossessing the land and selling it at market value.
But
where you were buying...
The constitution says that this land, even if it is bought, it can be compulsorily acquired for agricultural use by the president who will be sitting there then at that time. Is it not?
That is if they don't then follow up by amending the constitution. If they are aware to the legal provisions of the constitution, then they would just create, even outside parliament, statutory instruments. They've been doing that to safeguard now the land that they would have created. But the most immediate thing that they've done is that the 11 million hectares that we acquired through the fast track land reform is going to generate for them 6.6 billion United States dollars.
But the government has to pay around 3 billion to compensate white farmers.
And
when does it get that?
Why should they pay 3.3 billion?
That's a deal that they reached, isn't it?
No. But they are paying for what?
For improvements.
Which improvements? Because we have not have a publication of this farm belongs to Mr. Mhlanga, which he took through the land reform program. It was originally owned by Mr. Smith, and Mr. Smith had built this house and this dam, and he had fenced this thing, and for the improvements, we have valued the improvements at this much. Has that process been done? It hasn't been done, because you cannot just come up with a figure of 3.3 billion working with Adesina and say we owe the former commercial white farmers 3.3 billion. Where are you getting the figure? Because these things should be done transparently. If you go to the provisions of Section 289 of the Constitution that you were reading, transparency is one of the key things that is promoted, and it's entrenched in the Constitution. Anything to do with land has to be transparent. So if you want to compensate former white commercial farmers, please give us a list of the farms. Let Parliament set up a committee that goes to each individual farm and establish the so-called improvements. Do they even exist, the improvements? What's the value of the improvements? Then we begin to talk about compensation. But you cannot just sit arbitrarily. And that's the problem with this president. He just sits arbitrarily and decide on national matters. And worse still now, he's even taking government and state procedures to his farm, you know. There's no denigration of government and state processes that are worse than taking policy announcements from State House, from Parliament, from government houses, to your own backyard. And you begin to make political and policy announcements surrounded by a coterie of hangers-on who are not only pushing for anything, any sensible policy reform, but they are pushing for an agenda year 2030 so that they continue looting. So this is for all intents and purposes the so-called Land Tenure Implementation Committee and the ideas that it is coming up with. It's purely fundraising, and no one will be criminalized for speculating that this is a form of fundraising in order to push the 2030 agenda. So because this 6.6 billion will be an extraordinary war chest for the president and his hangers-on, so that they keep on holding on to state power. And in some spaces, the Zanu PF spokesman, Chris Mtsangwa, has actually divulged that we will not allow anyone to come into power as long as that anyone does not promote our business interests. So the 2030 agenda is being pushed, and the indications are even these fundraising projects, are connected to the 2030 agenda. So this is a gimmick that has been put in place in order to fundraise for an equally illegal extension of the president's term of office. So we have a president clearly who has gone rogue. And what he has done now is actually touching a live wire in this thing, trying to sell land. Because the Minister of Lands, Masuka, Minister July Moyo, the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance had meetings on the 10th, 11th, and 12th of December by former Zanla and Zipra commanders at HICC there, trying to sell this thing to the former liberation fighters. And they were asked a question. You are asking beneficiaries of the A2 land reform to buy land, to pay $500 per hectare. We are buying from who? Who owns this land? Who is the owner? Tell us the owner so that, bring the owner. If you three guys are not the owner, bring the owner so that we sit down with him and we negotiate prices. And we also want to know, he owns this land, where did he buy it from? Because for all intents and purposes, this land was fought for by those that took up arms and those that supported the liberation struggle. And some people paid the ultimate price in order for us to get this land back. And we cannot have just wake up one day with some group of people now purporting to be selling this land. Where do they get the local stand or the legal instrument? Where do they get the legal instrument to sell this land? Who said they own the land? So the former Zipra and Zanla commanders asked a very genuine question. They said, we want to see the owner of this land that you are now purporting to be selling. We want to see it.
Who are these people who attended this meeting?
There were 28. I'm not at liberty to disclose the name. I know them.
You named the others?
No, I named the government officials who were there. The government officials, because these are public servants. They were there. And if they want to dispute this, then you can give them a platform to say, we didn't attend that meeting, because that meeting was there at the HICC from the 10th, the 11th, and the 12th of December. This can be verified. I can actually even convince one of the people that were there to come on your show, and they can tell you what they discussed. But one of the fundamental outcomes of that meeting was to say, you three guys, if you are not the owners of the land, go and take the owner. We want to see the owner, and we discuss with the owner. We negotiate the price. But first of all, we have to establish what right does he have over the land that we are occupying. But mind you, they are purporting to be selling land that is being currently used by other people. And the president is purporting to be cancelling 99-year leases arbitrarily. Yet, the provisions of Section 289 of the Constitution outlaws any arbitrary action on the land ownership structure of the country. So the president has to act illegally. He has to go through the Zimbabwe Land Commission. He has to make sure that he acts in tandem with provisions of Section 290 of the Constitution, which says that all land is vested in the state. He has to deal with that if he wants to give people individual title. And he cannot do this as a mafia president, as a korokoza. You know, you cannot import gold panning tendencies towards national resources like the land. You can't do that. That modus operandi, that korokoza modus operandi, does not apply here. The president has to act and to respect the Constitution. He has to act legally.
Section
And not
289,
arbitrary.
Section 289 recognizes that the land is a finite.
It's a finite resource, yes.
So what does selling this land do to future generations? Because if all agricultural,
It doesn't do anything.
if all agricultural land is bought,
Yeah, it's not. It
means
doesn't.
some people are closed out.
No, but all residential land can be bought. And it means if you have the right to buy, if you have a title deed, you have a right to include others, and you have a right to exclude others, and you have a right to transfer ownership, and you have a right, your progeny have a right to bequeath that piece of land from you in the event of your demise. So, and what it also does is that it creates a market for residential land. So once you create a market for residential land, and once you ensure that there are legal instruments to protect the person who buys and to protect the person who is selling, it means that market thrives and it takes care of those concerns that you have. You buy. No one has been complaining about a residential land. The fact that whichever entity is holding residential land, be it council, be it the state through commonage, be it individual owners, have been selling that land to individuals. And it has been like that for years, and no one has complained.
We've seen that most agricultural land that was taken through the land reform, most people had no intention of farming on it, especially farms that are around the cities. They've actually subdivided them and they've converted them into lucrative, residentials there.
But as the law stands now, you cannot, because you have no title deed. If you are creating
we have seen
residential,
Crow Hill Farm.
Yeah, but
it's
yeah,
one of those.
But
It's one of those. We have seen the farm that just after Westgate, just after the roundabout, there was a farm that was subdivided, and people and land was sold.
Which one?
Just after what you call.
Because I stay in an area around that, the area called Good Hope. It wasn't a farm that was acquired.
There's a farm that does potatoes. Just potatoes.
Yeah.
Just before that farm, it was farmland. That was subdivided.
No, the whole of Westgate was farmland.
Yes,
but it was privately owned, because we are talking of land that is before the potato farm.
Yes.
It's called Adlin. That was a private property. It's private property. It's even where Westgate sits now, even where the American embassy sits now, it was private land that was acquired. The Westgate complex, that piece of land belonged, and even the surrounding area D, it belonged to Old Mutual. Old Mutual is the one that developed Area D. It was private land, because all this land that was here, all these farms, they were privately owned by individuals. They had title deeds. So it's easier for you to develop.
That's where my question was going.
Good Hope stands now, these were plots owned
that's
by
where my question is.
the
Is that-
Kangais, by
is that-
Mawarires.
With the
That
recent
was-
move,
yeah.
with the recent move, that means we could see a proliferation, because now when someone buys that land,
But these people don't have title deeds. Don't get lost.
they've been
because
given title deeds.
which ones? These are fake. They are not title. These are not.
How
title
do you
deeds.
convince-
How do you
convince
sit at your
jealous-
farm and say I've given people title deeds? There is a whole process to
Jealous
giving people
Mawarire,
title
Jealous
deeds.
Mawarire, how do you convince someone who has got a title deed given to him, which has stamps of authority, which is carried on a legal paper that has been issued by a government? You tell them that is fake. Convince them that is fake. Convince me that it's fake.
It's fake because you cannot purport to be holding individual title
Unless
over
it's challenged.
state land.
Unless it's
Section
challenged
2
in
you
court.
run into problems with the section 290 of the Constitution, which says all agricultural land
Do you know
is
all-
vested in the state,
all
and
this-
you cannot then say I am disregarding constitutional
all we are
provision.
saying here-
Yeah,
If
it's
anyone-
opinion, unless it
No,
is
it's
interpreted by a
it's
competent
not,
court
it's
of law.
not an opinion. It's a legal provision in the Constitution. If something is in the Constitution, it's not my opinion. The legal position in this country is that all agricultural land vests in the state. All communal land vests in the state. So the president cannot, as the law stands now, go pampandawana or kuzaka in Ward 20 where I come from and purport to be seated there and say I've given people title deeds. Anyone who will believe that will be mad. You have to be congenitally mentally retarded for you to believe that.
Where there's a
For you to
dispute-
believe that the president, if the president says I'm giving title deeds, then that becomes a legal instrument.
What I'm saying,
This-
jealous.
this-
What I'm
this
saying,
is
saying
fake
jealous.
that he's doing.
What I'm saying, jealous, is that where there is a conflict in terms of interpretation of the law, a court has to give its verdict.
No, but
is it not?
No, but
So
there's no conflict in interpreting section 290 of the Constitution.
Apparently there is, because
No,
the
why?
president believes he is acting legally. He has issued title deeds.
No.
and he has
No,
caused
the president-
offices of government
No,
to
the-
issue
no,
title.
the president-
and banks are going to lend. based
There's
on
no
that.
bank that is going to lend anything to these people.
So
No,
if it is his
that-
banks,
but they will be acting outside the
Why are
provision
we
of the
concerned?
concerned. Why are we sitting here and concerned and having this discussion if what the president has done cannot be implemented?
No, I'm concerned because what he is doing. No, someone can sit and decide on fleecing people. The president has suddenly taken land baronship to another level. He's just another land baron. There are a lot of land barons out there who are purporting to be selling land. Are they not finding clients? They are finding clients. Are we not concerned that our people are being duped? We are. Doesn't then the legal position subsist? It subsists because we have seen a lot of activities where councils have been demolishing people's houses. But these people had been convinced by land barons that they are buying pieces of land. That's exactly what the president is doing. The president has institutionalized land baronship. And he has taken it to another level. You are actually having the presidency being a land baron. This is what he's doing. He's a land baron, simply duping people by purporting to be giving title deeds. He has no powers to do that.
How do you dupe people when you don't have any personal gain in terms of getting?
No, the personal gain is there because he's getting 6.6 billion.
That's not going to his pocket, is it?
No, he's getting
state coffers.
No. What? Which state coffers? This government, this administration has been collecting a lot of money that is not accounted for. You look at the 2% that banks charge. No one has ever accounted how much they are making.
It's said every year in the blue book, is it not? The 2%.
Have you been told what it has been used for? Have you been told where it is going? No one knows. So what would become of this thing? He's not accountable. If the president is not accountable to the constitution in the first place, and acting outside the constitution and building something outside the constitution, outside an institution like the Zimbabwe Land Commission that is established by the constitution, he creates a parallel structure called the Land Tenure Implementation Committee. If he can do that, what stops him from not accounting? He's not accountable to anyone. Are land barons accountable to anyone? They are not. He's simply a land baron who is acting outside the provisions of the law, and this is all what he's doing is criminal. That's the reason why some of us are interested. We are saying, no, people should not be fleeced by this president because the president is acting outside the constitution, outside the provisions of the constitution. He cannot do what he's purporting to be doing. He is not legally empowered to do that. The constitution does not allow for what he's doing. If he was genuine that he wanted to give people title deeds, genuine title deeds, then he should have taken care of constitutional provisions which stop that. Section 290 of the Constitution. He has to deal with that. And any subsequent legal provisions that are there, like the Land Commissions Act or the Communal Act, he has to deal with the legal framework. Because he has been sworn in to defend the Constitution. If for whatever reason, there is something that he wants to do in the interest of the public, or in the interest of making the land viable, as per the provisions of Section 289 of the Constitution, that you want to make the land profitable and viable, then he has to act within the law. He has to go through Parliament. He has to amend Section 90 of the Constitution. After amending Section 290 of the Constitution, he also has to come up with an act of Parliament which empowers him to do what he's purporting to be doing. But you cannot put the cart before the horse. You cannot just wake up at your farm surrounded by a group of bootlickers and begin to be saying that you are giving title deeds. Even some people there, the irony is that some people who were even there were said to be the first beneficiaries of. So you announce something, all of a sudden someone has even titled this ipapo, microwave kind of thing. That's not how you buy land. Makatogera na president then says ndatokupa title deed. Then wotosumuka wautoveva chipepa utoti I'm the first beneficiary. This is nonsense. For lack of a better word, this is pure nonsense. You can't be doing this. You can't run a country like this. I see tax shop. Yukuti unongondo wamanya basera bona chunu wachitenga $2 woto yaba wakuchitengesa $5 without any regard for any law whatsoever. You cannot do that with land because of its historical meaning, because of its spiritual meaning. In our country, you cannot be doing that.
I've seen in the past that you have approached courts to deal with questions like this in the past. When you approached them to deal with the matter of elections, would you be approaching the court to deal with such pronouncements which appear to be taking a legal face?
It's not only the courts that should be approached. I for one don't believe in just one strategy towards dealing with particular issues. I'm a firm believer of being pragmatic and not being bogged down to what I call professional provincialism. Because most of the people here, because our politics has been dominated by lawyers, they think every solution to any political problem has to be legal. Yes, the legal path is there, but the political path, the political way is simply there for everyone to use. Because what problem do we have? We don't have a legal problem. We have a political problem. The political problem emanates from having a rogue president doing things outside the law, not respecting the Constitution. What do? You remove the president. That's the simplest that you can do. Remove the guy. Impeach the guy. Remove him.
Do you think with our parliament that has just been promised the second vehicles and have, do you think it's possible?
No, you can remove the president through parliament, through impeachment. That's one thing. You can remove the president through other means. And other means include mobilizing people onto the streets, rallying them because of what he has done. You can remove a lot of people. In Syria, the president has been removed. Now, we have seen a lot of other presidents being removed. Even President Mugabe, was he removed through impeachment? No, there was a coup. So there are several ways of removing a president. So this president needs to be removed for all intents and purposes. If you are a president who is acting outside the law, who is creating parallel structures in government, parallel structures in your own party, parallel structures everywhere, but with one sole objective of looting state coffers, of looting national assets, and there are several things that he has been doing. Mutapa, whatever fund, and looting state-owned enterprises. Now he has gone to looting land from those that have occupied it since 2000. And if those are not reasons enough to mobilize Zimbabweans to stop this president, no, nothing will. But I can assure you, this course that he has taken is inviting trouble for himself. And this trouble will be coming from the people. Because ultimately, the people are the state. The people are the rightful owners of the land that this implementation committee is purporting to be selling. So you can't sell that land without the express permission of the people. You can't do that. And the people are represented by parliament. You cannot then do that without an act of parliament. You cannot do that without consultation, because once you are coming up with an act of parliament, that act of parliament has to be subjected to people through consultations. So if you don't do that, the people will actually mobilize themselves and stop such kind of rogue activities within the presidents. And no one will be responsible for that except the president, who is acting outside the constitution, who is acting against the people that elected him in the first place. If you go wrong, the people will make you accountable, and the people will remove him.
Well, I want to thank you. We've run out of time, but I want to thank you for those incisive discussion that we've had. I mean, land is a right for Zimbabweans, and the war of liberation was fought for all intents and purposes to ensure that people of Zimbabwe have access to land. And it is deposed in the state for a reason, is it not? To ensure that there is no muscling out of other people by those who have money to buy land. Private property, residential stands, we can have people with 10 to 20 to 30 houses because they can afford it. But agricultural land is the mainstay of the revolution that was launched, the first Chimurenga, the second Chimurenga. It was on the basis that people wanted access to land, that Zimbabweans should have access to land. And our constitution, in its preamble, recognizes that. And it recognizes also in varying sections of the constitution, section 72, section 289, section 290 of our constitution, that the people of Zimbabwe have a right to agricultural land. That's why it is vested in the state, and that only the state will allow an equitable distribution of land to everyone, so that we avoid multiple farms. We avoid the situation that we had pre-colonial era and also pre the land redistribution program, where one person would own thousands and thousands of acres of land, while just a few people were confined in communal lands, where people in Chilonga, for instance, don't even have the right to own their ancestral land. Just a few years ago, people in Chilonga were up in arms after Darren Kutsie had been allocated vast tracts of communal land by the president to grow lucerne grass. But thank you very much, Jelas Mawarire, for coming through with those insights. But maybe I'll just give you under a minute your closing remarks to our viewers.
I would like to end by correcting a few things that emanated from your last statements. the land is not vested in the state so that there could be equitable redistribution of the land. But historically, if you look historically at the instruments that then gave power to the state, those instruments are a culmination of an understanding that was perpetuated even in the 1979 Lancaster House discussions, that there was a very strong belief and a very strong conviction within the white colonial settlers that blacks were not supposed to own agricultural land. And that's the reason why you have instruments that have perpetuated even after independence under the guise that no, the state is to control the land. That's not why we fought for the liberation struggle. We did not fight the liberation struggle so that an entity controlled by the presidents can own land. We fought in order that we repossess our ancestral land, that it comes to us, not through an instrument called the state, but the perpetuation of the state owning the land on our behalf is a perpetuation of the thinking of the Carter Commission, of the Land Apportionment Act, of the Land Tenure Act, and even the Communal Land Act of 1982. That understanding that blacks cannot own agricultural land. We have to deal with that. We have to deal with those vestiges of colonialism among ourselves and come to a position that as blacks, as individuals, we can own agricultural land. And we have to do that. How do we do that? We deal with Section 290 of the Constitution. We remove it. We deal with the 1982 Communal Land Act. We remove state ownership of land. And we give our own black indigenous people the sole right of owning land so that we can use it productively. We can sell it if we want to start other businesses, and we sell it to our other individual, our other indigenous people, so that they continue working on the land and they use it profitably for all of us. But these legal instruments, whether it's a constitutional provision that outlaws private ownership of land by black people, has to be repealed, because whites owned this land individually. Why can't we own it individually as black people? Mind you, we can't all be the 16 million Zimbabweans. We can't all be farmers. Let those that want to be farmers own that land privately so that they can access, they can convert that land into capital. They can borrow against that land and utilize the land effectively and more profitably. So we have about title deeds. I agree that we have to give people title deeds, but we have to do that recognizing the constitutional and legal minefield that we are in. Correct those first, then working through government, working through parliament, we create legal instruments that empower our people to privately own land, not the kind of circus that we are seeing at Precab Farm. No to land barons. We don't want land barons, whether the land baron is a president or what. We don't want that.
Amazing. Thank you very much. In giving out the title, President Emmerson Mnangagwa at his farm, Precab Farm, said, "We fought the liberation war to get back our land. Ivu rava nevene varu, vene vevu vave nevu ravo." The land is irreversible with its people, and the people irreversible with their land. The land reform program is therefore irreversible. Our constitution binds us to strengthen the land tenure system of 99-year leases and A1 and A2 permits. The constitution in section 289, 293 and 295 gives the right to every Zimbabwean to acquire, hold, occupy, use, transfer or dispose of agricultural land. Land tenure security is critically important to Zimbabwe's economic growth and development. It encourages investment, improves agricultural production and productivity, and it lifts many out of poverty into prosperity. This is what the president said at his pre-Cape farm when he launched this. Now, this will always be the situation right now with me, your host as usual, Dara B, on Heart and Soul TV and radio. I encourage you to like, subscribe, and share our content so that it gets as wide as reach as possible. Because on this platform, we believe everyone should be heard. We believe that it is Zimbabweans who build Zimbabwe, and it is everyone's right to be heard. I was with jealous Mbizo Mawarire, who was sharing his insights and views and what the Constitution says and what should be done for us to be able to give title to our people. He says no to backdoor politics. This is, and this will always be the situation right now.